As I began to look into the subject of Bigfoot, there was one piece of evidence that I found compelling above the rest: the Sierra Sounds. These recordings were made in the 1970s, and they are so enigmatic, so haunting, and so well vetted that it occurred to me, if there's anyone that might have some answers, it's probably Ron Morehead.
Ronald J. Morehead and Alan Berry, maybe? Is that right?
Yes, Ron Morehead. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. The Sierra Mountains. That's what it is.
All right.
And so it's the weirdest shit ever. Just listen to this. You're going to...
I read what it could be, but we'll listen first.
it could be bullshit.
Yeah,
That's what it could be.
The Sierra Sounds, recorded by Ron Morehead and Alan Berry, are considered by many to be the gold standard of Bigfoot evidence, while for others, like Joe Rogan, the jury is still out. However, these tapes have been analyzed by both audio engineers and linguists, and the experts in these fields have determined that the tapes are not only authentic, but that the voices present were utilizing sapient speech, an ability previously only found in humans.
My name is Ron Morehead, and I've been on this subject of Bigfoot since 1971 when I encountered him with a group of hunters in the Sierra Nevadas of California. I started going to Sierra Camp because one of the guys who had encountered these things in the original group of hunters, and by the way, the Johnson brothers, who were the original couple that started up there in 1958, always thought the strange stuff that might have went on there was due to a bear or something like that. And it wasn't until 1971 when they came out with this story of how something huge was making these rowdy sounds, and it wasn't a bear.
In 1971, Bill McDowell and the Johnson brothers were a little late getting home. This worried their wives, who had heard the stories. They heard that there was some kind of monster up there. They were also told not to talk about it. But Sharon, wife of Bill McDowell, reached out to friend of the family, Ron Morehead, and asked for help. Her story was confirmed by Donald McDowell, a member of their hunting party and brother of Bill McDowell, who was so traumatized by what he had seen, he wouldn't go back alone.
One of the guys got freaked out. He wouldn't go back, and the wives were worried because the other men didn't come out when they were supposed to, and they wanted him to go back, but he wouldn't go back by himself. So I was friends with them all, and that kind of got me involved with that group. I went back with him because it kind of excited me when I heard the story, because they said what the Johnson brothers were saying was true. There's some kind of a monster up there. So they didn't know at the time if the guys had been eaten, carried away, or just what had happened, maybe, because they wasn't aware of Bigfoot. Nobody was hunting for Bigfoot at the time or looking for it. It wasn't on anybody's radar.
With Ron in tow, the two men journeyed to the Sierra Camp. Luckily, the hunters were still alive.
So that's how I got involved in it, and that was 1971.
Wow. What was the first thing that you noticed at the Sierra Camp? Was it sounds? Was it footprints? What was the first clue that you had that you were dealing with something?
Well, the very first thing when I got up there, when we found out the guys were okay, that kind of alerted me there's something strange up here. It's not a bear like most people thought it should be. It was, I saw the track, and a huge track right there by the shelter. And they was on their way out. They was packing up, ready to go, so they were okay. So we was okay with that. Thank goodness I had a horse to ride out, because it's a very imposing area. 8 miles in the wilderness of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it's quite a trek to get there. And that's what got me kind of excited about it, because I wanted to be involved with them, and that got me involved, really, because I was, like I say, friends with them. But I wasn't really a hunter at the time, but I became a hunter after that, because I wanted to be involved with them. And that's really what they were doing up there, is hunting. That was the reason for the camp, the wilderness camp. It's way back there. And well, after I came out, and we all came out, and I started going back as much as I could when someone would go with me, and we started taking tape recorders, and I heard the sounds that they had recorded originally, the Johnson brothers, which were really cans falling over and ruckus going on. But it wasn't until 1971, the winter of 71, when you get snowed out and you can't go back, we started really thinking this over. And Warren Johnson wrote a 23-page handwritten letter to Ivan Sanderson, a cryptozoologist, and he thought, no, this doesn't happen. You know, apes don't do this. Apes this doesn't happen, multiple encounters. But he thought he'd forward it to Peter Byrne, who was on the West Coast in Oregon. Peter, I thought the same thing. I didn't know all this till I read the letters later on, the letter that Warren wrote. And Peter, thinking it was probably a hoax, he sent it down to Al Berry, see if he wanted to check it out. Al Berry was in Redding, California. He was working for the Redding Searchlight newspaper at the time as an investigative reporter. And he asked if he could go in. And of course, we wanted somebody to tell us what's going on up here. We still don't know. And I had gone back several times in 71. And I was all excited to get back in 72. So we went back in with Al Berry. Al Berry went back in, and the same commotions and rowdiness and chatter of some type was going on when he went in. And he thought, somebody's pulling my leg here. He was looking for a hoax. Really. He told us later, he said, he could never find the hoax, how anything could do this without leaving some sort of a sign way back there besides their tracks. But anyway, that's how it kind of started rolling from there. You know, Al Berry recorded the sounds, but he knew it was something really serious. We didn't realize just how serious it was at the time. We thought it was some kind of undocumented grill out in the woods and didn't know any different. But whatever these things were, they were talking to each other. They were really have some kind of something going on between them. It wasn't growls or grunts or yells or screams. It was something else.
In 1974, Ron and Bill McDowell went to the Sierra camp alone, and their friends did not disappoint.
There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow.
It sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah. Right there, just see movement right through there.
And that night, Ron got a glimpse.
It was 1974. We've been dealing with these things every year since 1971. And when Bill and I, my good friend Bill, he and I were the packers with the mules and the supplies that took into this camp. We'd say miles in the wilderness. So he and I had taken supplies in to replenish the camp. And we found a track on the trail going in, which 1974, now this is 3 years after it started with us. And I thought, oh, that's a good sign, you know. But prior to that, I write about this in my first book, Voices in the Wilderness. Our horses and mules got rowdy, real disturbed about a couple hundred yards up the trail. And we thought, well, that could be a bear, that could be a deer, anything could jerk slack out. In fact, right in that same area, we shot a 52-inch rattlesnake one year. I got a hat band made out of that. Anyway, got up to camp, and I started trying to get wood and get the stove going so we could get our dinner going, and I was getting late in the evening. Bill started undoing the horses and mules, and we started hearing this popping of trees and cracking of rocks rhythmically. all of a sudden we started hearing whoops back and forth from two different entities. This is it, they're here. That's what we've learned they do, and what we've learned also is to ignore them when they do that. Because if you ignore them, they wonder whether I got these guys' attention or not, and they start doing other things.
Hope I ain't saying nothing bad to them.
That was 1974 when this started, and this went on for over an hour that night, and that's when I got to see one finally, because really they're so elusive and so enigmatic. You just don't know what you're going to expect next. But I got to see what was making this big cry up behind me here, and it shot down through the trees so fast, inhuman-like through the forest. Bright moonlit night, it already started getting dark, and it was going down to two others, we think. I didn't see them, but Bill got a glimpse of one of them. There's an adolescent and a female down below, we think, because we were recording all this, and it sounded like the little one's making some little voice, and then here comes big down on it like that, and you got the big male up here behind me doing his samurai cry, shooting down through the trees. Kind of exciting night, I got to tell you, because I thought that's the night they're going to come and let us ride on their shoulders. We thought these guys haven't eaten us yet; they haven't carried us away in a sleeping bag. They can care less about the salt and pepper. We're just gonna. This is going to be a good night, and it went on for a long time like that. 1974, and I got to record it. However, the recording I was using then was just a little tape recorder I pulled out of my saddlebag, and I didn't get that out for a few minutes after they started all this stuff, but got some of it recorded.
A common critique of hearing the Sierra sounds is just how calm Ron and Bill seem to be.
Like, there's these loud whoops, whoops, and these guys are like in the foreground, like the guys who are recording, they're trying to communicate with these things. They sound so calm. I mean, if there really was giant 8-foot apes out there wandering around, like, 200-300 yards away from you, screaming and whooping and talking, would you really, and you're in the woods, would you really be so calm?
What Joe's missing here is that they weren't calm. Not at first. Donald McDowell never went back. However, this was 4 years into these adventures, and Ron and Bill were very familiar with this situation. They wanted to capture, they wanted to observe, and they were having fun.
So you weren't afraid?
At that time, we weren't afraid. I wasn't afraid. I don't think Bill was. Of course, he kind of wanted to go in the shelter, but I said, no, stay out here. It's happening. It is happening. So we've been, all the time, this has been going on in years past. They only interacted with us when we was inside the shelter. And that wasn't with us. They only made their sounds, their commotions, their chatter and all that when we were out inside the shelter. And the shelter's just a do log, I'll give you a picture of it. It's just with a log doorway, actually. It's not like we built something out of wood. It just deadfalled in up against these cables around the circle of trees. And they would always wait till we got inside, but you'd hear a snap or something, and that's how we alerted us, get inside, because they're going to mess around with us or make their sounds. That's what we didn't want to miss.
Can you just kind of give us a bullet point of who analyzed the tapes?
Huh?
Like the different people that analyzed the tapes and the importance of their analysis?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the analyzation we had of the tapes, really, which was very important, was Dr. Curlin, Professor Curlin, University of Wyoming, who studied them for a year. No deviation, no deception in the tapes at all. They were original. There was no 60-cycle hum, which would have shown pre-recording, re-recording at different speeds. There was no manipulation with going backwards or forward. He was a professor of electrical engineering, wrote over 100 papers. The guy is undeniable. I mean, you can't debunk him. He's a professor of electrical engineering. He knows what he's doing. Well, no one will challenge that. They can't. I mean, if they could, they would. Over 50 years, you'd think so. That's one bullet point. Second bullet point was 2008, Scott Nelson, cryptolinguist, two-time graduate of the Defense Language Institute, DOD, and trained to listen to unknown sounds to see if it's a language, to see if it's a code from a foreign country, to see if there's any deception in it. If it is a language, decipher the language. They were a language by the human definition of language, which means a morpheme stream of words. It's 10 or 12 words that make a sapient sentence like I'm talking now. That's Scott Nelson. Then I didn't get, Dr. Lieberman never heard our sounds. I think Alberry approached him once, but he again was in his classical paradigm now, apes can't talk. Well, he says, and he's a cognitive language guy his whole career, which he just passed away, by the way, in July 12th of 2022. And he said that only humans have the vocal mechanism for language. Well, to me, those 3 points, those 3 bullet points right there, Dr. Curlin, Scott Nelson, cryptolinguist, and Philip Lieberman, Brown University, puts it together. There have to be a human component to them, or there's a Bigfoot component to us. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The Bigfoot or the human?
They say seeing is believing, but what about hearing? I understand skepticism, I really do. Until science produces a body, or until you see one for yourself, skepticism is a perfectly natural reaction. I believe Ron, and I believe his story for many reasons. I do find the evidence compelling, but what I find more compelling is the man. I've gotten to know Ron pretty well since this interview. I find him to be a person of integrity. In fact, we've become very good friends. At 80 years old, Ron agreed to come out with me for a few days to go hunt for Bigfoot because of a tip that I received from the Squatch Watchers. We both thought that if what they were saying was true, then perhaps we could get a little closer to answering some of the mysteries that he had been investigating his entire life. For most of Ron's life, since the early 70s, he's invested his personal fortune and time into scouring the globe for evidence of the things that he experienced. You don't do that, and you don't live that kind of life if you don't believe in what you're doing. I believe Ron's story, and if you want to see what we found together, stay tuned. If you like this content, please like and subscribe and share it with others. To see some of our videos unedited, check us out on Rumble. As always, thank you for watching, my friends. Your support makes this possible.